Hello everyone. Welcome to our online lecture. After this session, I'm going to put this video on YouTube. So if you see it right now on YouTube, that's what happened. This is the last and final lesson of the International Finance module. So thank you very much for joining us. And basically today I want to go through a few things which are in relation to the assignment. So I'll go to the brief and try to pinpoint a few things which you might which you might need while completing it. I already saw a few assignments uploaded, which is really good. I look into them. I didn't grade them yet, but they seem to be getting exactly what I expected you to do. So that's good. Like it's not missing the mark. So sorry. So first, sorry, I have to share the screen once more. So the final assignment, this is basically the brief which you'll find on Moodle. Word limit, 2000 words, excluding numbers and formulas. The required format, well, it's a paper, so it has to be in either PDF or doc, or like a Microsoft Word, for the calculation, which is the third question. You can provide additional Excel file, but it's not really necessary. In referencing, you should use APA and Harvard, and the in-text references are absolutely necessary. That seems to be a continuous confusion about what the APA or Harvard referencing is. I kind of randomly pull out one paper from Edward Glaser, a respected Harvard economist who, even though he's from Harvard, he actually uses APA to reference. So, this paper, I just basically want to show you really quickly how referencing is done. The paper is entitled Why Have Americans Become More Obese Than Before? It's from 2003. It might not be really so relevant anymore. Anyway, in early 2000s, that was an issue which was talked about a lot. So basically for referencing, the golden rule is every time there is a factual statement you're making, if you basically say something is true and you don't really spend more time on it, you have to include a reference. It has to be written somewhere. It can be statistics, it can be another paper which mention it. It can be another paper which actually prove it to be correct. For in-text referencing, you basically just use you basically put it right in the text. So for example, there was a research over here which was published by US Department of Health and Human Services, which said that female adult weight rose to 143 to 155 pounds. So that's a factual statement. So US Department of Health Services, that's the in between 1977. So this is like a joint reference for two reports. So, and you can see basically every time there is a factual statement made somewhere. So for example, over here again, World Health Organization 2000 and 2002, or Fogel over here. Basically every time there's a factual statement. So these are in-text references, and then if you go at the end of the paper, so we don't spend much time on it, there's a list of references, or sometimes called uh, biography. Basically, you just mention all of the things which you mention in the text. You basically give details, and because for each source there's a name of the author, usually a leading author. So if there's 15 different writers, you mention them all in the list of references, but for in-text references, you mention one or two. So this paper was written by three paper, that there is always the journal where can it be found. So this is how referencing can be done. You can number them. You can just put them alphabetically. It's up to you, or depending on which guide for APA or Harvard you're using. So that's what it is. And now I'll go to the assignment. By the way, thank you very much for the papers for the investment game. I was really impressed by how much time you spend on it, how much how well it actually went, even though obviously these were really terrible times and the markets was really volatile. So once more, congratulations to Milana Rubcová, for getting such an outstanding result. Also, like, you can see that, like, there was quite a lot of people who made a lot of trades. So, like, obviously a lot of research into it went into it. Obviously, the people who did the best and also the people who did the worst traded the most. You know, yeah, this this season basically that this session of the game, the timing was absolutely everything. If you joined when we started the game, as many of you did, you basically started with it with disadvantage because like what followed was a huge market collapse, and so that wasn't something which like like anybody could have really expected. And hi, Aline. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm basically just recording the lecture now so I can put it on YouTube because we don't have many attendants today. So just please listen to it. I'm just right now talking about the investment game and how did it go. And please feel free to ask me any question anytime. All right. So by the way, Aline, fourth place in our investment game, and also quite a high activity. Solid result. Thank you very much. I already graded your papers, so I hope you like it. That was all right. You weren't disappointed or anything. And so yeah, so that was the investment game. So now I'll go back to also like with the investment game, I found out that quite a lot of you were like for quite a few of you it was kind of like stressful experience. The golden rule of like investing is that you should not really pay too much attention unless you like really enjoy it, and even then it's better not to pay attention because you tend to over trade and that costs money. So investments are not really for everybody. It requires a mental approach to it. It's always better to like use some diversified portfolios instead of individual stock, because then like the volatility is too high. And but considering that how much activity there was in the game, I hope that for each of you it's going to be at least a memorable experience. So yeah, so thank you very much for participating, and I hope that at least some of you had a fun with it. So to the assignment, again, Aline, right now you are the only participating student. So if you want to ask any question about the assignment, I'm here. I wanted to go through each of the questions and kind of pinpoint the the relevant theory and kind of like a highlight what is going to be needed for it and kind of explain, because well, we didn't talk like a lot throughout the semester, only during the consulting hours. So what I want to do is kind of like highlight the most important concepts which you need to know for completing the assignment. And we'll go from the back, because well the questions are actually ordered that way, that like the theory which is earliest in the textbook is the last in assignment. So question 3, it basically gives you a number of investments which you have to go through trading currencies, and you have to figure out which one is the best. In Moodle, it's actually one of the earliest readings. So I'm just going to skip to it. It's in the Unit 3 reading, which like deals with with the foreign exchange markets, how currencies are traded, and then like at the end of this first PDF you get to forwards and futures, which basically tells you like like you need to know to understand this question, you have to know how currencies are traded, and you need to know what the spot and forward market is. So, we already, that's actually one of the concepts which we still managed to cover in the class. So the spot market is when you change the currency immediately. It means like, you go to a bank and you change, $1 million to million or to like, I don't know, 900,000 euros. Forward market, on the other hand, is a market with agreements that currency is going to be exchanged in the future. So you basically buy a contract which says, which will allow you to change $1 million into euros in 3 months, in a year, or in our case, in 5 years. Obviously, because there's expectations of what the exchange rates are going to do, the rates are not the same. So, in our brief here in the question, what I'm asking you is to consider a few investments. First of all, in any scenario, you have $1.5 million, and now you have to decide what to do with them. So first option is that you will basically just invest them in 5-year treasury bonds. And you basically wait out the maturity, and at the end you have a certain amount of money. Or, you can do something which in that reading 3 in the second PDF, you like, if you read it, you probably already know it's called a covered interest arbitrage. So in this like arbitrage trading, what you do is you're going to basically look at the interest rates of different government bonds, and you figure out, okay, so in the United States there's 2% interest, and in Europe there's 1% interest, in Britain there's 0.5%. But like India has 7%. Well, it's kind of a lot, right? So maybe instead of investing in the US Treasury bonds, I'll just change all my money to Indian rupees, and I'll invest in that, because I'll get 7% interest. And because you don't want to just speculate, we don't know what the currency, what Indian rupee is going to do in exchange with euro, with dollar. So I'm also going to buy a forward trade for 5 years, so I can change, back. And the interest rates, the exchange rates are listed over here. So these are the spot, and these are the forward. So basically, what I want you to do is you take the $1.5 million, and you exchange it to all of these currencies, you add the interest, and you exchange it back. And then you compare it with your return on the investment in US dollars. So I can actually just like to show you what it does. I can just like do the first one.
Awesome, thank you.
All right.
Because like I started doing this paper and like I got stuck on this question. That's why I joined this call.
All right, perfect. So at least I'll be able to explain it. So what you have is $1.5 million. So this is what you have.
Mm-hmm.
All right. US interest is 2%, 0.02. So after 5 years, what you get? After 5 years, you should have this times one plus the interest, but of course it's 5 years, so I have to, 5. So you should, after 5 years, you get this much money.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And now what happens if you invest in euros? You can see that the euro is expected to strengthen, because, originally you have to pay $95 for €1. At the end of the 5 year, only 90, for $1 you get only 90 cents, euro cents. So for euro, like I'm just going to copy these two rates.
Mm-hmm.
Spot, forward. So this is the spot rate, this is the forward rate.
Mm-hmm.
I have Excel set up with different commas, so I have to correct this. And the interest rate in euro is 1%. So what do you get? So first, what you do, you have a $1 million, 1.5 million of dollars. So you convert it into euros. So this is how many euros you have. If you change it at the spot market, you just go to a bank and you change the dollars for euros. So these are euros. Then you, as before, you use the interest rate 1 plus interest rate. Again, I have to add the interest for all 5 years. And there's something, yeah, of course, the decimal point is here problematic. So this is how many euros you get after 5 years. And you already own the forward, so after 5 years, you have to change back at the interest which you agreed before. So now I have to change the dollars back to US dollars. So, and that's what you do, here I was multiplying, so here I'm dividing. And this is how many dollars I have at the end of the 5 period. And now, if you look at it, I just made $80, because the difference between this one is actually, if I just go the difference, if I just calculate the difference.
Okay, so I calculate all of them, and then what gives me the highest number, that's the most profitable one, and that's the answer to the question?
Not yet, because there's one more thing. Right now, I made $95, but the question also says the forward costs 2% of the exchange value. So what I actually have to do here is I still have to multiply it by 0.98, because I have to take away the 2%, or you can do it this way: 1 minus 0.02. And again, to the decimal point problem, and bang, I just lost $33,000. So if I compare it, just investing in US bonds, and if with investing in euros, the euros are definitely not the right investment, right? Because, well, I just lost $33,000, after 5 years of waiting. Or actually, I didn't lose them. I just made $33,000 less than what I would get if I just invested in bonds. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. Finally.
Yeah,
but the 2% again? What with the remaining cost 2% of the exchange value? You multiplied it by 0.02, the whole number, or?
Yeah, exactly. The number, because basically before before I get over here. Now, now this is the money in euros just before I need to change them back. Okay. But the forward costs me 2% of the forward costs me 2% of the exchange quantity of money. So I have to basically take 2% off. So I can do it now, just because it's all multiplying, dividing, it doesn't really matter in which order I put it. So if I just divide it, multiply it by 0.98, this gives me the amount of euro I can actually exchange. And now I divide it by the forward, and I get exactly the same thing.
Okay, great.
That fee for exchanging basically needs to be considered, and needs to be considered because it basically shows you that all of these transactions, they cost money, so there always have to be some institution which sells you the forward, sells you the currency, so it's not costless, so it needs to be included in the calculation. But what I want you to also cover in the assignment is to explore the concept of arbitrage. And because if I actually, what you would expect, if you see calculation like that, if you kind of ignore the fees, if you ignore the 2% over here, you would expect that you know, all of these, like, you know, basically when I go through the whole, you know, round of exchanges, that like all of the profits will be exactly the same. And that's given by the arbitrage, you know, basically, because like, you know, if you look at these trades over here, they are basically all absolutely safe, you know, or should be anyway, because you're basically just like, you know, buying a forward which guarantees you the exchange rate, and you know, you're investing in government securities which are really safe. So if there was a high interest somewhere, what you should expect is, you know, that, you know, if there was some like some if there was some opportunity to be made, then more investors would channel their money there until they will equalize, you know, and they equalize by, you know, change in changes of these rates. So basically what happens is, you know, let's say that, I don't know, like, you know, Europe increases the interest rates to 2%. Suddenly, you know, there's more money to be made in Europe, you know, so more investors wants to you know, like they want to like they want to buy more euros, and at the same time they buy securities to exchange them back in the future. So this will go up, which will actually, the number will get smaller because this is US euro exchange. So this will go down, this will go up, and like, you know, if the 2% and 2% over here, they should be actually exactly the same. So and because of these like equalizing of the exchange rates, you know, eventually basically all of the investments in the world which have the same level of risk, which is none in this case, you know, should have the same profit, you know, because and that's because the markets are efficient, and investors, they just like go around and fish for opportunities. And if there is a riskless profit to be made at a higher interest, they just channel their money in there, and eventually that profit disappears because more money like gets exploiting that opportunity till it all equalizes. And so this is like the concept of arbitrage, which I want you to kind of explore how it exactly works. And so the calculation is only, you know, half of this question. To explore the concept of arbitrage is the second one. Does it make sense a little bit?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Yeah, like it's in all that like a reading 3. You know, so like if I go to the second file over here, you know, that like exactly like there's a concept that like there's a whole section on arbitrage over here. So, and like, you know, what the forward does in there, then you know, if you go later on, you know, you can read about uncovered interest arbitrage, which you know, is when you don't buy the forward, you just kind of wait it out, or the covered interest arbitrage, which is exactly the thing which we're doing in that exercise, in that calculation up there.
Okay.
All right, so like, you know, you basically like, you know, you read this section and figure out how it works. There's also a really good section over here on the speculation. So it's the question 3 in assignment. Then question 2, it's on the PPP levels, and like, you know, the concept of purchase power parity. You know, so there's again like, you know, yeah. So like this concept is dealt with in the reading 4, which like a kind of like a nicely that like, you know, shows you know, how exchange rates are determined, and like what things kind of play the biggest role in there. This table kind of like nicely summarizes it. You know, like you know, like you can expect that, for example, if the price level, if a currency has inflation, that like, you know, the value of it will probably decrease. If there is a productivity increase in a country, then like, you know, the value of the currency is going to be increased. Then if the consumers' preferences change, for example, they like to they start buying, I don't know, like Italian cheese, then in that case, you know, you know, if U.S. consumers start buying Italian cheese, then like probably the you know, the euro will appreciate. That means it will gain value. If there's a trade barriers, then like exactly like that the thing, like then like the value of the currency should go as well, up as well. You know, it can be explained like basically like as with everything in the world. Yeah, the price of currency is determined by supply and demand. So these charts over here, like really simplistically but very nicely, kind of show how currency is, how the prices developed, and it shows like on a relationship between dollars and pounds. So this is a demand for pounds. All of these charts are demands for pounds. And so like if relative price levels increase in the US, so what happens? Basically suddenly things in Britain become cheaper. That means that US consumers will demand more of it. At the same time, people in Britain will probably not want to buy so many US goods because they become comparatively more expensive. So supply goes down, bang, the price for pounds suddenly have to pay 0.6, not 0.5 dollar per £1. So the price of pounds went up. With productivity levels, basically productivity is that, if you increase productivity, it means you can make something cheaper, in a cheaper way. You can make more of it at the same cost. So like, per one good, it's cheaper, which means that like if in the US, if there's an increase in productivity and let's say in Britain stays constant, then, British people will demand more of it. But also, US people will probably buy less of US goods. So there's a demand switch, and so British people buy more of it, more of US goods. So that's the switch of supply, and the switch of demand. It's the US people will buy less British goods. So the dollar strengthens. Um, and like the preferences, that's just a demand. Like again, like if US people just start buying more of Italian cheese, then there is a switch in demand. The there's going to be a bigger demand for euros, because you need to have euros to buy the Italian cheese. So the exchange goes from 150 to 155. And with trade barriers, well, they make foreign goods more expensive, so there is a decline in demand. So in that case, the dollar strengthens to 1.45 from 1.5. So this is how currency is determined. But going to the purchase power parity, which is kind of explained over here, there is a theory which basically says countries have different price levels, and in long term, the prices and exchanges move to correct these differences. Mm-hmm. This book is kind of like reasonably skeptical about it, and like very correctly says that even though that might be theoretically true, it's not, because not all goods are traded. So this like equalization of the price levels should be basically used only for goods which are traded, because you can never expect that, like for example, like a local services, for example a haircut, will cost something else in Germany and will cost something else in Bangladesh. Unfortunately, there's no way how to, because these places are so far apart. So obviously, haircuts are not tradable goods. You can move people, but that takes ages. So. Until there's like a differences in like there's significant decrease in differences in GDP levels between different countries of the world, this like PPP concept, that means purchase power parity concept, to use it for exchange rates doesn't really make much sense, but it does make sense for tradable goods. Anyway, it is true that like the purchase power parity is kind of useful for determining long-term trends, especially like in the last 30 years. It's very useful, mostly because the differences in GDP levels kind of are kind of decreasing. So this book also, like there's a whole section on the Big Mac. So the question is not really of, and like the question, it deals with the Big Mac index, which is basically a way how to use purchase power parity to figure out which currency is overvalued and or undervalued. So, if I'm just going to like highlight this map over here, so basically, they use this index, which is a nice simplistic index to show you that, against US dollars, which is in this case is zero, which currencies are undervalued and overvalued. So, it basically says that, Sweden, Norway, and Switzerland are only currencies which are overvalued against dollar. Europe is basically on par, and then most of the developing world is undervalued. The problem with the PPP indexes, they are also used for GDP, where it makes a little bit more sense. Maybe I can start explaining that first. And again, in your reading, if you go to your reading, you basically you find that section on GDP at the very end over here of the reading, and there the purchase power parity, they basically address a really reasonable concern, and that is, if you compare how well off, how wealthy people are in different countries, you have a problem, because you basically usually express the GDP in nominal in nominal terms, and basically means how many, usually in US dollars, how many US dollars per year on average a person makes. Not in salary, but if you take the whole economy and divide it by number of people, that basically is the GDP level of a per capita GDP level of a country, and that is used as an approximation of how well off that country is, how wealthy it is. The problem with that is that the currencies, they are extremely fiddle, they change all the time. So if there are major swings between the prices of currencies, and that there are major differences in prices of currencies, and basically, from year to year, it might appear that the GDP level went down by 20%. If let's say in Turkey, the lira, Turkish lira basically just loses 20% of its values, and then it looks like the country is 20% cheaper, 20% poorer. But that's obviously not true, because the people up there might not really struggle so much. There was no such a a recession happening in Turkey in the meantime. Also, because the price levels in different countries are different, it basically if you just express GDP in dollars, it doesn't tell you how much they can afford, because again, if you go to a store, the things which you can buy in Turkey are probably much cheaper than the things in the stores in United States, say. Or the haircut, the before mentioned haircut, will cost you much less in Turkey than in the United States. So the PPP levels are traditionally used to kind of correct for these differences. You basically take what people take the consumer basket of things which people spend money on, and you figure out how much they can actually buy at the monthly salary or whatever, and then you compare these levels instead of just comparing the GDP in trading exchanges. And it usually gives you much smaller differences than if you just take the nominal GDP. So for the GDP comparisons, it actually makes a lot of sense, because the PPP levels have a little bit better, telling value. They basically tell you how well off the people are, even though they appear to be, if you just take the GDP in the nominal terms, they appear much poorer, because they can just go to shop and buy more things than what they would be able to in the US with the same money. I hope it still makes sense. It's kind of it's an interesting concept, but has a lot of problems, because if you do this a kind of comparison of of like correcting for the price level. That means how many goods of comparable quality you can buy with the money in different places. You immediately struggle with how do you recalculate it if the things are not comparable. So for example, let's say that coffee in Italy is more expensive than in the US, which it actually is, especially if you take the quantity in consideration. You go to in Italy, but then we find out that in Italy, people have strong preference for really high quality coffee. While if you go in US, if you go into a Starbucks in the US, and you get like iced coffee, which is half a liter, you figure out that first of all, it's less concentrated, it doesn't taste like much as the Italian espressos, and per quantity it's actually much cheaper because espressos are tiny, while like the iced coffees in Starbucks are gigantic and like not taste so well. So even if you just compare and then you basically need to compare the price levels into two countries, and you figure out that okay, these people, they're actually not buying the same things. So how do you actually do it? That's a problem which statisticians deal with all the time, and it's unsolvable, because there's not really comparable goods. You can do it these textbooks that uses for steel, for example, because steel is actually fairly well comparable and it's very tradable. But how do you do it for the price levels in different countries for basically everything which you need to buy? And goes with absolutely everything. For cars, there's if you're comparing a car in the United States and in Europe, you'll figure out there's plenty of differences which make it somehow uncomparable. You can compare the engine size, you can engine size, the efficiency. You can compare, how many seats the car have, for example. But then you stop and if you figure out, okay, European regulations on safety are much higher, so the US cars are actually comparably, uh, more dangerous, but at the same time they are cheaper, right? So you can't really compare the price levels using cars unless we consider all these things, and you can't really do it because how safe the cars are. You compare it only you figure out in the years in the future after you find out how many people died in the cars, for example. So this comparability of goods is a major issue in the PPP levels calculation, and that's where the Big Mac kind of come in, because Big Mac is a rare example of a good which is fairly well comparable across all the countries in the world. If you get a Big Mac in the United States, you very likely get a very similar good to what you get in Prague, or if you go to Egypt, or if you go anywhere else. So again, going to the assignment, basically all of these countries, they sell Big Mac, and so Big Mac can be calculated for, and you basically just take that one good and say, okay, there's plenty of things which go into preparation of Big Mac. There's labor, there's rent, because the big McDonald's need to rent places, and they all around the world, they usually choose places which are well connected to to where people are. So the rents should be comparable. The beef prices, of course, they are not they are not perfectly comparable, but you usually use the same quality of beef to be used in Big Macs. So in theory, if you just use that one good, which is Big Mac, you can figure out where people are overpaying for it and where people are underpaying, because this theory says if the prices were the same everywhere, then the Big Mac should really cost the same everywhere as well. But because they are not, we can use the Big Mac, which is perfectly comparable good or fairly well comparable good, to figure out how these price levels actually differ. Still makes sense?
Yes.
Perfect. And that's exactly what this map is showing. So Czech Republic undervalued. Brazil. By the way, there's only 2 of you again. So yeah, so Brazil is pretty much on par with dollar in this measure, but again, like, you know, it's not a perfect measure. It's just like a simplistically kind of showing what it is, and I'm just kind of giving you kind of here an idea of what you can talk about, you know, when you are answering these questions.
And so if we finish this assignment, we submit this, and we submitted the one earlier, and
Yeah,
we put
when
some
you're done.
answers for the questions on the website, we're good.
Yeah, yeah, these are the only requirements. There's going to be one more thing which you need to do, and that's like, you know, I'll have to put up like a fake exam dates. You know, you don't actually have to do absolutely anything except of you probably have to register for the fake date, so I can give you the grade. It's just like a kind of like a cumbersome way how our system works, the SIS. You know, so I open a date, you enter your name in there, I'll give you grade. So that's all, you know. But like, yeah, like the requirements as you said them, you answer the questions on Moodle, you submit your paper on the investment game, you submit this paper, and you're done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Obviously, like, you know, in the unlikely case that like any of you would fail, you know, I would let you to redo it. Like, that's not an issue, you know. Like, you know, it's still like, you know, the rules on how many times you can try still apply. So don't be worried that like, you know, but then like, yeah, that you would just like not pass in a case that like, you know, something would go wrong. You know, you'll have a chance to redo everything. Yeah, so, and the last question, which I kind of like wanted to mention, currencies, that's that question 1, which is paradoxically the last one in our reading. Countries that use gold standard in the past have often experienced inflation and deflation and large imbalances in their current account. You know, so export is Spain and provide historical examples to confirm it or disprove it. I'm not saying it's right. You have to find out yourself. And I'll just talk about it a little bit. So basically, all you need to do for it, like, you know, the unit 5, 6, and 7, they kind of deal with the different currency regimes, and you know, so you find all the information in there. Mostly, you know, relevant is the unit 5, which is the chapter 13, and it basically deals with like the automatic price adjustments under gold standard, and like, you know, how theory kind of evolved around it. So you know, basically what you need to know is gold standard, you know, like is something like it's very similar to fixed exchange. You know, it basically means if the country has a gold standard, it basically means it can't really change it's like the value of its currency. It can just like issue more of it because like, you know, they would need more gold. The problem with the gold, using gold as a currency, is that, you know, at any given moment the supply of it is limited. You can just like print more money because your economy is growing. You can't like you can't really like, you know, you can't kind of stimulate economy by printing more money. If there's more goods be made and there's a set amount of gold in a country, it means that the prices will go up. The problem with gold standards was not only about this management of this business cycle, but, you know, this chapter actually deals with what happens if, you know, there is a current account imbalance, or like deficit or surplus, which like, you know, like the mercantilists in the past dealt with a lot. They were like, you know, basically not allowing exports of gold. And what happens in a country when that happens, and there's like a really nice take on it by David Hume, the philosopher. You know, he basically said that like, you know, this correction kind of like happens on its own because, you know, like you know, last semester we talked about this equation, which is basically the quantity theory of money, where you have amount of money or amount of gold in the economy times its velocity equals prices times how many goods are made. Basically means if the economy, if this much stuff is made in the economy, there must be this much money to be bought for it. And this P basically should serve as a equalizer, because if there's not enough of money and there's more stuff made, then the prices need to go up, hence inflation. And because gold is limited in supply, then the P should basically equalize everything. It basically should, if there's, if the economy is growing, that the prices should grow as well, because there's more stuff being made and there's only limited amount of gold. And now, what happens if gold goes in one direction from one country to another one? Well, in that case, the prices in that country will go up, and while they will deflate in the other country, where they are, which have current account deficit, which will make the country which has a deficit more competitive over time, because prices will go down, and the other country which receives gold will, the prices will go up, because, well, they have more gold, and and because the deficit country will become more competitive, eventually they will become more competitive, that the trend will reverse and the whole thing will basically equalize again. That's what the traditional theory said, and to a degree it actually worked. The problem with this line of thinking, is that this classical theory basically expected that the prices will basically do all the equalizing, and it basically expected the velocity of the money and the product to stay constant. And that's definitely not true, which was later on kind of taken back. Later on in this chapter, you can read about Keynes, the British economist, John Maynard Keynes, who basically said, okay, but prices are sticky. That means, prices actually, they tend to not move so much, while the product can increase a lot. And part of the prices, which are sticky, are the are the wages, basically, how much money people take home in salaries is part of the equation and the prices. And especially for in a downward direction, that means decreases in salaries, they are actually extremely inflexible. So if there is a moment where the prices should go down to make the economy more flexible, that adjustment, the automatic adjustment, which was expected by classical economists, it actually doesn't happen. And what does happen is that the product goes down, and that is visible in a recession, and that's visible in in unemployment. Because if prices don't go down, then that adjustment is basically taking place in product. There is still automatic adjustment between the current account deficit and surplus. It still reverses itself. The only problem is that the deficit country actually goes to the recession and unemployment in the meantime. And so that's kind of an unfortunate quality of the gold standard, that if you, and basically all of the fixed fixed exchange regimes, that these adjustments are very often, if the prices are not flexible, then basically you see recessions and unemployment, which you basically do the same thing, but the whole process is much more painful. And it's exactly what's happening in Italy and Greece in the last 15 years. That they have their currency pegged to euro. Prices are not really flexible, so there won't be any deflation which would make them more competitive. So they see huge unemployment and stagnating economy for the last 10 years. And because that current account imbalance is being corrected over time, but because the salaries are not going down, that will take ages before they will become competitive yet again. So I'll get you to kind of take your conclusions from all of this on the question in the paper, and you can write about it. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope this was helpful. I'm going to throw this lecture online again, so anybody who couldn't come at this time can watch it. I'm sorry I had to organize the lecture out of the normal schedule. It's just, you know, times are difficult. So yeah, Aline, thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you.
And yeah, I saw Beatrix here, like, you know, being here a few minutes as well. So, you know, so thank you, Beatrix, for coming as well. And for everybody else who will watch it later on YouTube, you know, like, if you have any questions, contact me. Thank you very much for participating in Investment Game. It was great fun. Thank you very much for the papers which you wrote about it. They were really nice read. And yeah, and that's it. So I'll be looking forward to your assignments.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.